Cuba just joined BRICS, and this could rewrite the global playbook as we know it. A tiny Caribbean nation locked under US sanctions for over 6 decades is now shaking hands with China, Russia, and India. This isn't just diplomatic fluff, this is a tectonic shift. BRICS, the alliance once dismissed by Western media as a symbolic club, now controls more of the world's GDP than the G7. And now Cuba wants in. Scratch that, they already got in. This changes everything, because while the world's focused on wars, elections, and celebrity gossip, a silent alliance is growing, one that doesn't need the US. Dollar? Doesn't care about NATO and is quietly building a new world order. But what no one is talking about is why Cuba, of all countries, was invited to the table. What are they bringing? Who benefits? And what does this mean for the rest of us? You're about to find out. BRICS isn't just a catchy acronym anymore. It's becoming the heartbeat of a new global order. What began in the early 2000s as a coalition of 5 emerging economies, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, has transformed into a geopolitical force, challenging the West's long-standing dominance. These nations now control over 40% of the global population and more than 30% of the world's economy when measured by purchasing power. And they're not slowing down. They're building alliances, ditching the US, dollar and trade deals, and expanding their influence across Asia, Africa, and now the Western Hemisphere. Enter Cuba, a small island with a big past. For over 60 years, it's been under US sanctions. Its economy is battered. Inflation's high, wages are low, and the youth are leaving. But don't mistake weakness for irrelevance. Cuba is a survivor, and more importantly, it's a symbol of resistance, revolution, and independence. Just 90 miles off the coast of Florida, Cuba's location alone makes it one of the most strategically important nations in the world. And here's where things get interesting, because BRICS isn't just accepting full members anymore. They've created a new category called partner countries. It's a softer, faster way to expand their influence without the bureaucracy of full membership. And Cuba? It's one of the first. That means something. That means this isn't a fluke or a formality. This is a calculated move by Cuba and by BRICS, but why now? Why is this happening in 2025, not 2005 or 2015? Because the world is shifting. The dollar is weakening. Global alliances are being rewritten. And Cuba sees an opportunity, maybe even a lifeline. And BRICS sees a chance to punch even closer to America's doorstep. So the big question becomes, what does this mean for you? For global trade? For migration? For security? For the future of your country's economy? Because when alliances shift, currency changes, influence changes, and yes, your life could change too. And yet no one's really talking about it. Not in the headlines, not on the front pages. That's what this video is about. So if you care about the future, not just of Cuba, but of the entire global system, stay locked in. We're just getting started. To understand how Cuba ended up knocking on BRICS' door, we need to rewind the tape. Because this move didn't come out of nowhere, it's been brewing in the shadows for years. Go back to the early 2010s. Cuba was already economically isolated. Its once powerful alliances with the Soviet bloc long gone. The US embargo, still strong. Tourism, hit hard. COVID-19, devastating. Inflation and fuel shortages pushed Cuba to the brink. And just when things seemed to stabilize, global power dynamics started shifting. Enter Russia. For Moscow, the Cold War never really ended. It just went underground. And with the US pouring weapons into Ukraine, Russia needed to flex its own geopolitical muscles. What better way than cozying back up to Cuba, its longtime Caribbean ally? By 2022, diplomatic traffic between Havana and Moscow was heating up. Russian warships docking in Cuban ports, trade deals signed under the table, economic agreements that gave Cuba access to wheat, oil, and credit, all while the West was distracted. Then came China, silent, calculated, and always watching. China saw an opening too. Economic instability in Cuba meant influence could be bought cheap. That's when the BRICS alliance, now emboldened by global crises and US missteps, began talking expansion. Not just symbolic expansion, but strategic expansion. They weren't just adding countries to make headlines. They were adding countries to send a message. But Cuba couldn't meet all the criteria for full membership. Its economy is too fragile. Its trade is too narrow. So BRICS did something new. They created a fresh tier. Partner countries. A more flexible status that allowed strategic alignment without full commitment. And guess what? Cuba was among the first to be offered a seat at that smaller but powerful table. This happened quietly. No global summit, no fireworks. Just a line in a diplomatic memo. Cuba has been accepted as a BRICS partner nation. The timing, not random. Just months after Russia intensified its push in Latin America. Just weeks after China doubled down on de-dollarization. And just as US influence in the global south began to fade. It wasn't just Cuba applying. It was BRICS recruiting. And now with its foot inside the door, Cuba isn't just surviving anymore. It's playing chess. Long game, high stakes. And the rest of the world still playing checkers. This wasn't an overnight decision. It was a strategic move, timed, shaped, and guided by Russia and China's ambitions. And now the island that once stood alone is standing in a new crowd. A crowd that's rewriting the rules. So why Cuba? Why would a group like BRICS, built around economic muscle, want an island still struggling with blackouts, food shortages, and a weak GDP? Well, here's the thing. BRICS doesn't just want economies, it wants leverage. Start with geography. Cuba is a stone's throw from the United States, literally just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. That makes it one of the most strategically located countries in the Western Hemisphere. For BRICS, especially Russia and China, placing influence this close to America is like moving a queen into your opponent's back row. It changes the board. And then there's the politics. Cuba has always worn its anti-US badge with pride. It's been under American sanctions since the 1960s. No Starbucks, no McDonald's, no Wall Street investments. That defiance? BRICS eats it up. Because the bloc isn't just about trade, it's about rewriting the global script. And Cuba? It's already off the Western page. But this goes deeper than ideology. Cuba's influence in Latin America is bigger than people think. It trains doctors, sends aid, and builds relationships with countries from Venezuela to Nicaragua to Bolivia. When Cuba speaks, much of the left-leaning Latin American world still listens. And that's exactly the kind of soft power BRICS needs to expand its grip on the global south. Now let's talk business. Cuba may not be a powerhouse, but it's not empty-handed either. Take biotech. Quietly, and with little fanfare, Cuba has developed one of the most advanced biotech industries in Latin America. They created their own COVID vaccine. They export cancer drugs. They've got labs that rival those in developed nations, especially in niche areas like immunology and neurobiology. That's not small stuff. Then there's oil. Cuba's offshore reserves in the Gulf of Mexico are still largely untapped. Western companies are locked out due to sanctions. But BRICS? Not so much. With Russian and Chinese drilling tech, those reserves could be accessed quickly and cheaply. Energy is power, and Cuba has it, waiting. And don't forget rare earth minerals, nickel, cobalt, even lithium nearby. These are essential for electric vehicles, phones, and military hardware. And guess who's already investing? China. They're quietly positioning themselves in Cuban infrastructure, telecom, and logistics. Cuba may not look rich on the surface, but to BRICS it's a goldmine of untapped potential and strategic influence. It's a forward base. It's a voice in Latin America. It's a biotech partner. And most importantly, it's a message. A message that BRICS isn't just expanding in Africa or Asia. It's here, in America's backyard. This isn't about GDP. It's about positioning. Cuba is the move you don't see coming until it's checkmate. Cuba didn't join BRICS just for the headlines. This is survival strategy. It's lifeline diplomacy. Because for Cuba, this move could be a total game changer. First up, money. Cold, hard cash. The BRICS New Development Bank, or NDB, is flush with billions in funding. And unlike the IMF or World Bank, it doesn't come with Western strings attached. No lectures about democracy. No austerity programs. Just capital. Cuba's inclusion as a BRICS partner makes it eligible for soft loans, infrastructure funding, and joint investment ventures that could breathe new life into its crumbling economy. And it's not just about loans, it's about access. Cuba's biggest problem isn't just a lack of money, it's being cut off from global trade. Decades of US sanctions have left the country out in the cold. But BRICS? That's a pipeline to new markets. China alone imports more than $2 trillion a year. Brazil, India, South Africa. These aren't just allies, they're massive consumers. With BRICS, Cuba gets to bypass Western choke points and plug directly into the global South's economic current. Imagine Cuban biotech sold in South Africa, Cuban medical schools training doctors from India, Cuban tourism open to Russians and Brazilians instead of just Europeans. That's not just trade, it's transformation. But the benefits go way beyond economics. BRICS offers Cuba something even more valuable: political cover. When the US pressures countries to isolate Havana, Cuba can now say, "We've got BRICS behind us." That's 5 of the world's biggest nations, including 2 nuclear powers, backing your sovereignty. It's a shift in power dynamics. The next time Cuba faces a UN resolution or sanctions or economic blackmail, it won't be standing alone. It'll have a diplomatic shield. And not just any shield, a global one. This alliance also strengthens Cuba's negotiating power in Latin America. It can show up at regional summits not as the isolated rebel, but as the voice of BRICS in the Western Hemisphere. That boosts credibility, that wins favors, that opens doors. And here's the kicker: Cuba gets to do all this without compromising its political model. BRICS isn't asking for regime change, it's not demanding reforms. It's saying, be who you are and let's do business. For a nation that's survived more than 60 years of embargo, that kind of partnership is rare and powerful. So what does Cuba get out of BRICS? It gets funding, it gets trade, it gets protection, and it gets relevance. In a world that tried to erase it, BRICS just handed Cuba the pen to start writing again. The world is watching closely, and not everyone is cheering. The United States? Let's just say eyebrows are raised in Washington. Loudly. Cuba aligning with BRICS, backed by Russia and China, sets off all the geopolitical alarms. To the US, it's more than a diplomatic shift, it's a threat. A country under US embargo for over 60 years now suddenly has access to new trade lanes, financial systems, and global partners outside of American control. That's not just inconvenient, it's dangerous, especially with Havana so close to Miami. And the European Union? They're caught in the middle. Some EU members quietly support Cuba's integration into the global economy. Others fear it will embolden autocracies and tilt the balance even further away from Western influence. Nobody wants a second Cold War, but BRICS expansion with Cuba as a symbolic player feels like a warning shot. But what does this mean for the rest of the global South? To struggling nations in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, this move sends a message. You don't need the West to grow. You don't need the dollar to trade. You don't need Washington's permission to develop. Cuba's entry into the BRICS circle is a bold flag planted for sovereignty, independence, and multipolarity. Yet with every opportunity comes risk. For Cuba, the tightrope just got thinner. Aligning too closely with BRICS could bring even harsher US sanctions. It could isolate Cuba further from Western humanitarian aid, tech cooperation, or tourism. And let's not forget, putting all your economic eggs in the BRICS basket can backfire. What happens if China pulls back? What if Russia's own economic troubles spill over? Dependency is dangerous, especially when it shifts from one superpower to another. So yes, Cuba joining BRICS is historic. It's bold, but it's not a fairy tale ending, it's a high-stakes gamble. And the world? It's holding its breath to see which way it lands. So is this the dawn of a new world order? Is BRICS becoming the backbone of a post-Western economy? And is Cuba, long seen as a relic of the Cold War, now stepping into the future as a key player in reshaping global power? We want to know what you think. Is this a smart move for Cuba, or a dangerous dance with giants? Does this signal the rise of the global South, or just another geopolitical chess match? Drop your thoughts in the comments, we read every single one. And if you're into raw, unfiltered geopolitical deep dives that cut through the noise, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Tap the bell so you never miss a story that actually matters. Because in a world shifting fast, understanding the game isn't just smart, it's survival. See you in the next one.